Since 2008, Marvel Studios has taken Hollywood by storm. But in recent years, the proclaimed Marvel Cinematic Universe has stumbled. Marvel fans have fought vigorously with each other, defending or criticizing the franchise. This documentary spotlights proclaimed Marvel enthusiasts, showcasing their opinions on the current state of the MCU, and to answer the question, has the MCU fallen off?
Yes.
Not a doubt in my mind.
Yes.
You're joining at a bit of a low point.
Okay, I get it. Let's dive a bit deeper.
The MCU has definitely fallen off in the recent years, just compared to their popularity in the past.
The MCU has fallen off, absolutely.
I think, without a question, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has fallen off catastrophically. Guardians of the Galaxy is a fantastic movie. It had the perfect mix of comedy and seriousness, and you look at a movie today, like The Marvels or Thor, Love and Thunder, I turned Thor off 20 minutes in because it was just so painfully unfunny.
The MCU was at its peak, I believe.
Endgame, 100% Endgame. The Avengers Endgame was the peak of Marvel.
I can definitely say that things peaked at Infinity War and Endgame.
Late 2000s, I guess I would say mid-2000s to late 2000s.
They made a fantastic endpoint for a 10-year saga.
Yeah, I think at the height of like the Iron Man movie, the original like 1 and 2 Thor movies, I think those origin movies leading up to the Avengers was probably when at its peak. There was a couple of movies you could have to give credit to getting them there, while X-Men technology-wise and effects wasn't up to par as those movies. The success of the X-Men franchise and the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man series pretty much led to that boom in the Marvel Cinematic franchise, so I think you have to give a nod to them.
Piggybacking off of that success and that hypeness for the superheroes was a very good idea by Marvel.
I think most people can agree that superheroes are just cool. We've all wanted to have superpowers when we were kids. In recent years, I've thought that super speed would be really cool. I can run to Texas and grab an In-N-Out burger in 5 seconds on my lunch break. That would be nice. But a lot of things that make superheroes very appealing to most, I think, is the characters themselves.
Seeing your superheroes in the comic books come to life, I think seeing that, like the visuals to what you read in the books and the graphic novels or the original comic book series, and seeing those characters go through the conflicts and go battle the villains that you've been reading about for years is probably the coolest aspect.
The most appealing aspect of Marvel projects to me is probably all the action sequences. I'm down for a good action sequence. I love them so much. They're like my favorite thing in all the Marvel movies. That and the Iron Man suit-ups. You know, especially, oh my god, the helicopter one where he literally clicks a button on the console of the helicopter and it literally just goes around him and he falls back into the seat and then he's out of the plane. It's so cool. I love Iron Man suit-ups.
I'm not sure what specifically made the MCU so successful. Maybe it was because it was during the end of the superhero boom with the Spider-Man trilogy and the X-Men movies and all of those. But I think the thing that cemented its popularity was the Avengers. That was a great movie from beginning to end. It's a movie that is a crossover, but you don't need to see the originals.
I think the MCU is still successful because they're a brand. There's so many products outside of the movies that they make money on, so even if the movies falter, they will still make those losses up in a lot of ways, whether it's through merchandise, such as t-shirts, cups, action figures, DVDs, theme park in California. Like, they're gonna make up the money in so many different ways that not every movie has to be number one for it to be a success.
It's very, very successful. Are you kidding me? When they're paying Robert Downey Jr. $15 million for 3 days on Spider-Man Homecoming, you know, they're successful if they're able to pay that.
I think Marvel could have been successful without Disney personally. I think just it protects them, gives them more backing, more financial backing. It's a good thing being part of that library and having that Disney logo next to them, but I don't think they needed Disney in any way.
Why do I think it was successful? Superheroes, man. Lots of people just like superheroes.
I can never really tell you what my favorite Marvel movie is because I always think of a new one. I know before Spider-Man No Way Home came out, my 3 favorite Spider-Man movies were tied. It was Spider-Man 2, Into the Spider-Verse, and Homecoming, and they're all fantastic movies in my opinion. No Way Home, I think, topped all 3 of them, but I still don't know if it's my favorite Marvel movie.
The original Avengers. The storytelling is probably the best they've done in an Avengers movie. There's this scene where I remember it so vividly. It's Loki walking down to get an eye for something else, right? It's all silent except this music and then the sounds of crowd screaming and obviously the sound effects. They tell the story through you just watch, right? You're just watching this part and there's just this beautiful music going and it's just like the perfect scene. So it's just like that along with the story in it, I've literally seen it so many times, it's ridiculous.
Days of Future Past is gonna be remembered in 50 years, I can tell you that. They're all, at least they all were very good. And it's honestly a shame that I'm not as excited for future movies because I just don't see them being as good as they were a while ago.
I have 2 favorite Marvel movies. The first Iron Man movie I thought was very well done. I think it's one of the perfect introductory movies for a character, so I thought that was exquisite. And I will also say the first Guardians of the Galaxy, I wasn't expecting it to enjoy it as much with characters I didn't really read before, but I was generally surprised with the intertwining of music and the new characters and the storylines. I thought it was very well done. So I tend to like the introduction movies more than the sequels or the combined Avengers movies. I think the solo movies are much better personally.
Another question that is so funny to think about is the least favorite Marvel movie. And in recent years, there have been so many terrible movies that absolutely rock each other every single time a new one comes out. My least favorite Marvel movie for a while was Captain Marvel. And I didn't even hate it. I thought it was like a solid 4 or 5 out of 10. There were a lot of things I didn't like about that movie, and there were a lot of things I did like about that movie.
The first bad Marvel movie that I can think of is the Daredevil movie with Ben Affleck in 2003. Yeah, I want to say that was not very good. The follow-up with Elektra with Jennifer Garner was pretty bad. Those early 2000s movies, there were some hits and misses there.
I actually watched Howard the Duck not too long ago. And while it's probably objectively one of the worst movies ever made, it was just so funny that I couldn't bring myself to hate it. Madam Web is in a very similar boat. It's objectively terrible, but it is so funny to watch with your friends that I just can't bring myself to hate it. Morbius is actually objectively not terrible, but it's so goddamn boring that I don't think I'm ever gonna watch it again. So if I had to pick, that's probably the winner, or the loser.
Either Thor the Dark World or Ant-Man Quantumanium. I had such good hopes for Quantumanium too. I was so ready for it to be a fantastic movie. And there are parts, don't get me wrong, there are parts to Quantumanium that I really like, but it's just bad at the end of the day.
I was super hyped for Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. I could not tell you why. I thought the trailers for that movie looked insane and awesome, and I was there opening night. And when I got there, my feelings gradually shifted towards, oh God.
I mean, the job of a trailer editor is, even if it's a bad movie, to excite the audience to get them into the theater. So the trailer editor did their job, but it can impact the movie experience, especially when you have expectations. Like if you cut that film and edit that film in a certain way and the audience are expecting to see that storyline and that plot details and those characters in those particular situations and you don't deliver, it can have a lot of negative feedback. And I think that was started at the beginning of, that was like the first strike for Marvel that kind of led towards the downward slope.
A lot of people like to point to Endgame as where things started to fall off, and I'm going to disagree. There are some cracks if you look at it as a starting point for what came next, which unfortunately is how things happened.
I think the turning point for the MCU's decline in quality is when they started focusing on characters that the audience just simply didn't care about. That's just my opinion. I think that's part one, is that they weren't focusing on characters that the audience that were popular for in like that you related to Marvel.
From then on, they had projects like WandaVision, which started off strong and ended pretty terribly, or movies like Black Widow, which were made during COVID, and those cracks were definitely visible. That era is, I believe, when they thought they were too big to fail, and these days, with continually declining box office revenues, they're starting to realize that they are not, in fact, too big to fail.
And then I think the second thing with the Disney Plus connection, when they started focusing, you had to watch all the Disney Plus series, and then you had to watch 5 movies. Like, if I need calculator, aspirin, and an assistant to figure this out, you're gonna lose the audience.
Listen, I'm all down for like tie-ins with TV shows, but they could have done better. The original Netflix ones are like peak. The original Daredevil, I really hope they don't mess up the new Daredevil, by the way. But the original Daredevil was really, really good.
I think Disney Plus was a big mistake in terms of storytelling for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because a few years ago, when they were making shows for ABC and Netflix, and I think a couple of them on Hulu, none of them were required viewing for the movies. I did not need to watch Daredevil to understand what was happening in Avengers Age of Ultron. And that's a good thing. They're in the same universe, but they're not tied to each other intimately. But when required viewing for Doctor Strange 2 is WandaVision and not Doctor Strange 1, it makes me scratch my head. I think that those TV shows have put a very bizarrely shaped anchor on the movies. And even though I still think the movies have been and are declining in quality, the shows definitely did not help their case.
Don't get me wrong, some of the Marvel shows, Moon Knight, Loki is probably my favorite one, just because I'm a time nut. So anything dealing in like time travel and time things is right up my alley. So Loki's obviously my favorite. Do I think it ruined the viewing experience? No, because we're still getting story that we wouldn't have on the screen for movies, you know?
I think that Marvel is suffering from hubris. I think that they thought that they were very infallible. And a lot of their new characters were not very well designed.
See, I would focus Disney Plus on side characters as opposed to the movies, because movies are such a big investment, they cost so much money. Not that the TV series doesn't, but you could have a condensed version, you don't have to have a full 13 episodes, you could do it as we've seen in 6. You know, you never know which character is going to get caught on, and then who knows, if a character catches on, then that character could get a movie out of it, right? You don't know. So I think Disney Plus could be a great way to establish characters, and also for young adults who maybe aren't reading the comic books as much, they can be learning about these characters through the TV series now, through their Disney Plus subscription. So I think we also have to look at it as a positive experience, not just all negative.
I don't really think there's much of a comparison. The DECU has maybe like 2 good movies. That's just it. You know, the MCU at least has a lot more good movies, realistically.
The DC Extended Universe is another example of hubris. They had a very interesting start. I liked Man of Steel, and I think the director's cut for Batman v Superman was pretty good, but they decided out of nowhere that they were going to completely change course because they, the studio, were infallible.
I think it's had a similar progression as Marvel. Like, it's been very up and down. Some movies have been successful, some movies have faltered. Like, the first Wonder Woman movie was amazing, but the second one was a bomb. First Joker movie, successful. Second one, a bomb. So it's been very up and down.
I don't really think there's much of a contest between them. I think the MCU has flushed out their universe a lot more than... Not saying there's nothing wrong with the MCU. Obviously, there's things that are you know, a mess. But in comparison to the DC Universe, I think we're doing all right.
I think some of the DC movies are better than the Marvel movies. Like, I enjoy, for the most part, all the Batman movies, this particularly the recent ones with Robert Pattinson starring as Batman, the Dark Knight series. So I just prefer them.
DC is in a very similar boat to Marvel in that a lot of their movies were very good. Nobody's going to try and say that the Dark Knight trilogy is bad. I think Batman Begins is one of the best Batman movies, period, and there are a lot of Batman movies. These days, they're putting out things like Joker 2, which takes the original movie and crumples it up and throws it into a trash can. And they continue to prove that they can make good projects like The Penguin, similar to Marvel with Deadpool and Wolverine, but for whatever reason, they continue not to. And I couldn't tell you what's going through their heads. But they were in a very similar boat in that they were doing very well for a very long time, and something happened and now they're squandering it.
You know, we have separate Batman movies, separate from the DC universe too, so it's like a similar trajectory. But we haven't seen Max really be much of an impact there. I think that's been one difference because there's not as many original TV series, like there are, but there's not as many as there would be for Marvel on Max. They haven't done much with that.
I feel like a couple of them are on the same quality, like Wonder Woman, especially the first Wonder Woman. Yes, 100% is on the same quality as some Marvel movies, but it's like the only one, you know. There's like only one that's like as good. So, in my opinion, at least.
I think it also comes down to what you're a fan of. Like I'm a hardcore fan of Batman, so I like darker characters, so I tend to go to the DC universe over Marvel universe. Marvel movies just kind of, I don't get as excited for the Marvel movies as much as I do for the DC movies because I just like the darker landscape. It just appeals to me more. So I don't like necessarily the cartoonish as much as with Marvel movies. So I think it also depends with what your interest is too and which characters resonate with you.
I think that the brand new James Gunn DC Universe film franchise has a lot of things going for it. James Gunn has had hit after hit after hit.
I still enjoy the DC universe. I still like their heroes, their characters. I like that they're more grungy and dark. So I am hopeful that they come back from their unfortunate decline.
It's hard to give a response yet. I don't like to judge until I've seen a movie, right? Because I'll never forget when it was announced that Heath Ledger was going to play the Joker, and there was a lot of backlash for it. It's like, oh, the guy who just played in Brokeback Mountain, no, he's going to play the Joker. Like, there was a really negative connotation, and then now look at this, everybody can't picture anybody else, even though we've had other people play the Joker. I think I need to see a movie first to be able to correctly answer that, but I have high hopes. I mean, I think they came in to fix some of the problems, and let's see where it takes them.
I do also think that there are some red flags. I think they are biting off more than they can chew with this new Superman movie. They also started the universe with a cartoon called Creature Commandos, which is already out. So that universe officially has started already. But with a cinematic universe like that, if you're going to do a tie-in show or even a cartoon, there has to be some build-up. Your cartoon can't be the build-up to the superhero movie. The superhero movie has to be the build-up to the cartoon. Nobody was going to watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., or at least in the numbers that they got, without Avengers preceding it. Something like that needs to have foundation to work with. I think they are going to be successful, but in a couple years, they're going to come to the conclusion that they would have had a stronger start if they had just started with Superman.
With all the release changes as Marvel course correctly, I think a lot of the release changes have had to do with COVID, have had to do with the writer's strike. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's the only reasons to give Marvel more time to work on these projects, even though I think they should, and I think that is a good model. I think Marvel, part of the problem was I think they were rushing through some of these movies and spitting them out too quickly.
I think they're going in a better direction because they're taking more time with their projects.
Less is more, you know, there's no reason to spew out so much content at once. There's plenty of things to watch on television and to enjoy the characters for a while.
I don't think that they're learning the right lessons. They have learned a couple of the correct lessons, like don't make 50 movies and TV shows a year. 2024 only saw the release of Deadpool and Wolverine in theaters, which I thought was fantastic. So with the recent public decision to slow down, I think that's indicative of they realize that something's wrong, but they haven't learned the correct lessons at all. They don't know how to write characters, and they think that they can pluck actors that people remember and put them in new roles, and everything will be hunky-dory.
Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom, I kind of question it. I mean, it's a cool idea, but, you know, I mean, again, can anyone picture him other than Iron Man? It is kind of weird. I think the audience is going to have a hard time with that one, personally.
They had to pivot real hard, and I think that was part of their writing issue right now and why things are being pushed back. It's because they have to pivot and they have to try and figure all this stuff out. So, yeah.
I do not read very many comic books, but I know enough about them to say that things have not been looking good for them, at least in the last couple of years. I know that sales have been declining for a long time, and that's another reason why I think they're learning all the wrong lessons, because they continue to insist to adapt comics that aren't selling very well.
I do think they should take more inspiration and creativity from comic books, because there's just a lot of good stories that I've heard about in comics.
The audience has changed now, right? So I think those who are watching the movies have grown up and are now paying mortgages or retiring, right? So I do think they need to be starting to focus on what is happening to the Spider-Man character in current comic books, what is happening to Batman in the current comic books. You know, it started out with focusing on the stories that the audience already knew about the characters. I think we can now start looking into stories from the comic books that we haven't introduced to a wider audience yet. And also, I also think that's been part of the problem too, is that maybe they haven't focused on the comic books as much. I think they try to surprise the viewers.
Taking the comic and keeping very key aspects of it, but bringing in their own creativity and originality to the story would be perfect, I feel like. And I feel like they just need to figure out how to mesh the two together well, and it's not really something I don't think have done too well, but not saying they've done a terrible job on it either.
If I were to pick a character to have a movie, and I was told from Joe Disney himself that it was going to be the best movie ever made and that they were going to put all of their creativity into this one movie, I think that character should be
Black Bolt. Dude, they did him so dirty in Multiverse. Oh, I love that character so much. He's so cool. He's what? He's a martial arts expert. He can literally just one word can just disintegrate you. It's so cool. And they did him so dirty. He's trained to keep his mouth shut in crises. Trained. But oh no, what mouth? And dies? Come on, dude. Oh, no, I want a Black Bolt. I like Black Bolt.
In Marvel, I would love it if Jack-O-Lantern was in a Spider-Man movie, solo movie, or a part of the Spider-Man movies. I just always liked that Spider. It was such an obscure Spider-Man character, but you can tie it in with Halloween and the horror theme that I think would actually work really well.
I think the Moon Knight television show would have benefited greatly from being a movie. And that's a show I thought was pretty good, at least until the ending. I didn't love the ending. But I think that would have benefited greatly from being a movie. And even if it wasn't that plot, that same writing team, I think a Moon Knight movie would be pretty cool.
How would I change the current MCU? I would honestly not release anything for a year. I would honestly take a year off. Just don't release anything.
Fix some plot holes, change up the story a bit. My own opinion, I wouldn't have killed Tony Stark. He's just my favorite character.
All systems stop, and let's think about what's going on here. If it was a perfect world, I would say stop at Endgame, and Spider-Man Far From Home and No Way Home are like the epilogues, and then completely start over. That way you have an excuse to continue to make movies with Captain America and Thor, even though their stories are over. You can start again, adapt a new comic book, a new arc, and do something different instead of trying to prolong the life of a universe that peaked over 5 years ago.
So there's just some aspects that I would change of, people thinking, there was a better way of going about this. You know, I'd change the universe in a way where they couldn't do something like that. They couldn't, like, there's, like, I would try and explain a reason of why she couldn't just put it on and snap, you know? Things like that.
Do some focus groups on characters, like get some audience feedback on characters that they want to see in the movies. I think picking obscure characters should be for Disney Plus, and then focus on the popular characters that everybody knows about and most people in pop culture knows about.
If I was not able to change the past, if I'm not able to say stop at Endgame and start over, I would say cancel Secret Wars, cancel Doomsday, and hold here. We just had Deadpool and Wolverine that people loved. What did they love about it? I would figure out what that is. I would have my multi-bajillion-dollar studio geniuses pick and prod at what might be the issue, come to the understanding, and course correct with that knowledge.
The decline of quality in the Marvel Cinematic Universe can be attributed to many different factors, and as such, many fans have lost their enthusiasm for future projects. Has the MCU fallen off? It appears so. But something that hasn't is the desire for a recovery, and a return to the quality of entertainment akin to the past. But as we head into the concluding projects of the multiverse saga, all we can do is hope.